China has cleared a hydropower project in Tibet, close to the border with India. They're building dams on the lower reaches of the Brahmaputra on the Chinese side. Our next report tells you why India has reason to worry.
China is taking a massive risk with plans to construct the world's most dangerous megadam high in the Himalayas, which could disrupt water supplies for 1 in 5 people worldwide. They're pushing forward with a series of dams along the Yangtze River, set in some of the most remote and rugged places on the planet. But the risks are enormous. How will this bold plan impact the vital water sources that millions depend on? Let us look deeper into what this audacious project could mean for our global future. Harnessing the power of the mighty Yangtze. China is building a large network of dams on its longest river. This is part of a series of hydroelectric power stations being developed in some of the most remote and difficult places on Earth. These rivers start high up in the mountains and provide water to about 1/5 of the world's population. One of these rivers, the Yangtze River, is especially important for the country's economic plans. The government wants to build over a dozen dams along this part of the river, but placing these structures in such narrow gorges is not easy. This quest for power could shatter the ancient rivers, setting off consequences no one ever imagined. It is believed that the upper part of the river, known as the Jinsha, which lies between Tibet and Sichuan province, could generate up to 112 gigawatts of power. That's about 1/4 of the country's total hydroelectric capacity. But this isn't even the most impressive part. The nation is seen as a leader in hydroelectric power worldwide, and the southwestern part of the country plays a key role in its plans. Developing hydroelectric power is a big part of the push to reach its net zero emission goals. This area has the highest potential for hydroelectric power in the world, with many rivers flowing down from the Tibetan Plateau. As soon as we land in the land region, the energy from the motion is quickly transformed into a form that can produce electricity using water. But here's the tricky part. While these areas have a lot of potential for generating energy, they also tend to have very unstable ground. Building technology that can handle these unpredictable conditions requires a lot of creativity, innovation, and money, making the whole process quite risky. In the Jinsha region, for example, the situation is even more challenging because of the way tectonic plates meet, making the ground especially shaky. The biggest dam planned here will be 239 meters tall, even taller than the Hoover Dam. This makes it a huge engineering challenge. Since the dam is right on the riverbed, it needs a strong foundation made of a thick mix of rocks and concrete to keep it stable on the soft, shifting ground. But that's not the worst part. The surrounding areas are also at risk of landslides and avalanches. To protect the dam, massive concrete walls are being built along the edges of the gorge. The dam itself is constructed with many layers of concrete, each layer as big as a skyscraper, to strengthen it against the powerful forces of nature. In a region in Asia where earthquakes happen often, dams are being built on unstable ground surrounded by steep mountains. In 2007, this area experienced over 100 earthquakes, especially between the Sichuan Basin and the Jinsha River. Then, in 2008, a powerful earthquake hit Wan, located at the top of the Sichuan Basin near the Jinsha River. This was one of the biggest earthquakes in the country in hundreds of years, causing the tragic loss of more than 87,000 lives. The worry is that if an earthquake happens along the fault line near the Jinsha River, it could destroy all the dams along the river. If one dam breaks, it might cause a domino effect, where the next dam breaks too, making the disaster worse each time. This growing threat means that each dam collapse could lead to even more severe outcomes. Next, we see how the Yangtze Dam affects local people and their sacred places, the strange threats to Tibet's sacred grounds. For example, the Yangtze Dam is expected to create a huge reservoir that will stretch many kilometers up a valley, forcing villages to relocate. It's reported that almost 4,000 people will have to move, and 5 temples will be submerged. The Chinese government has mentioned these effects in an environmental report, but the details of the impacted sites are still unclear. Religious sites in Tibet are facing serious threats, especially places like the Wo Monastery, which was built way back in the 13th century. This monastery, like many others in Tibet, suffered greatly during the Cultural Revolution. A lot of its cultural heritage was lost during that time. But despite all that, it managed to survive, and inside its walls are ancient paintings and murals that are almost 700 years old. Now, these treasures are at risk from flooding. Recently, leaked videos have shown something unusual. Tibetan protesters trying to stop the construction of a dam. This is a rare display of protest, as the government keeps a very tight grip on Tibetan areas, making it hard for information to get out. Since the Chinese military entered Tibet in 1950, the government has been working to bring Tibetans into the broader national identity, one that is loyal to the Communist Party. For Tibetan and Buddhist communities, monasteries are the heart of spiritual life in their villages. Losing them would be a huge blow to these communities. So far, the Chinese authorities haven't made any comments about this situation. Building dams along the Yangtze River is a key part of China's plan to meet its energy needs. However, this comes with big risks. These large-scale dam projects have been compared to fast food. They provide energy quickly and effectively, but they also come with a lot of problems. And the dangers are real. If anything goes wrong, the consequences could be very serious. The real concern is how these changes affect the people there. In the heart of Tibet, there's a place called the Great Bend, where the Yarlung Tsangpo River makes a sharp turn, changing its direction towards India and Bangladesh. This bend wraps around one of the tallest mountains in the Himalayas. Right in the middle of this area, you'll find the world's deepest and largest canyon, called the Yarlung Tsangpo Grand Canyon. If you were to stretch this canyon out in a straight line, it would be about 30 miles longer than the Grand Canyon in the United States and 3 times as deep. The sheer size of this canyon is truly awe-inspiring. Because of this, the Chinese government, in its latest 5-year plan, has announced plans to build the most powerful hydroelectric dam in the world right in this remote location. This project is in one of the most secluded areas on Earth, and it's considered the most challenging undertaking ever attempted. It's not just the most technically complicated construction project to date, but it's also set to be the most expensive project ever planned on any river. For nearly 20 years, China has been considering this ambitious project at the Great Bend, looking to harness the strength of one of its most powerful rivers. Moving on, we look at a huge dam project planned in a remote, challenging area. Power and peril in the Himalayas. The main reason for this is the huge difference in elevation, about 2,000 meters, from one end of the curve to the other. We don't know all the details about the construction plans yet, but one idea, known as the Motuo hydropower station, involves drilling a tunnel through a mountain that is 7,700 meters tall. This tunnel would divert river water through it to generate up to 60 gigawatts of electricity. To put that in perspective, that is 3 times more power than the largest hydropower plant today, the Three Gorges Dam on China's Yangtze River. It sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? But there's more. Another big challenge in building in this area is how remote it is. Not too long ago, there wasn't even a main road leading into Meadow County. This place is not only tough to get to, but is also located in an area that is both geologically and politically unstable. For starters, it sits right on the border where the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates meet. Not far from here, one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded happened, a magnitude 8.6 in 1950, just 200 kilometers away in Assam, India. But that wasn't the worst part. Since 1901, the area has seen over 4,000 earthquakes with magnitudes above 4.5. The area is well known for its frequent and large landslides. For example, in March of 2021, just a short distance from the canyon, a major landslide blocked part of the Yarlung Tsangpo River. This caused the river level to rise, creating a serious threat to areas further upstream. In a similar event, another landslide on a different river in the Indian Himalayas triggered a devastating flood that swept away a bridge, took many lives, and destroyed 2 hydropower plants downstream. Close to this region is the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh, which China mostly claims as its own. This is just one of the disputed areas along a loosely defined border called the Line of Actual Control. Since the 1960s, this border has been the site of many conflicts and military standoffs between India and China, showing the ongoing tension in the region. One notable incident happened in June of 2020 in the Gawan Valley to the north. This clash led to the first combat-related deaths in the region in many years, marking a serious escalation in the long-standing tensions between the two countries. But that's not the worst of it. The closeness of the project to these areas, which have a long history of disputes and conflicts, adds another layer of risk and complexity to the region's already fragile stability and security. Since 1975, the relationship between these two countries has been filled with tension. Things are already strained, and experts think that building the largest hydropower plant in the world near a disputed border will only make things worse between these two nations, both of which have nuclear weapons. People in China might not see this project as a strategic move, but for India and other countries downstream, the situation feels different. They worry about the possible consequences and ask themselves, what are the real risks here? There's also concern about what this means for the river itself. Beyond political issues, the environmental impact of projects like this can be very serious. Research shows that dams and hydropower stations can cause a lot of harm to river ecosystems. One big problem is that these structures stop sediments that naturally flow downstream, which then causes issues with the machines inside the turbines. We now explore how Tibet's culture clashes with new development goals. When sediment is trapped, it can lead to erosion along the riverbanks and even cause parts of the river deltas to sink. With all these problems, it's easy to wonder why this project is moving forward at all. The answer lies in China's strong desire to boost its environmental sustainability. China has set a challenging goal to stop increasing its carbon dioxide, CO2 emissions by the year 2030 and to completely balance out its carbon emissions by 2060. But reaching this goal is no easy task. The country relies heavily on coal to meet its huge energy needs. Right now, over 60% of the energy there comes from coal-burning power plants, and they are still building more. In 2020 alone, new coal-fired power stations were approved that will add more than 38 gigawatts of power. Altogether, nearly 250 gigawatts of coal power is either being planned or built. Building a dam on the Yarlung-Tsangpo River is a small part of the bigger plan to reach these zero-emissions goals. Even though it might not make a big difference on its own, Professor Wang believes this project is still an important step. He sees it as an example of the kind of strategies the country will use to tackle its environmental problems, focusing on large-scale projects that aim to move toward cleaner energy. The approach shows that efforts are being made to deal with environmental challenges head-on, even as the expansion of coal power continues. The government is looking at a mix of solutions, sticking with some current energy practices, while also considering new, potentially game-changing projects like the dam. This shows just how complicated it is to balance the need for energy today with the goal of protecting the environment for the future. The government strongly believes in the power of big construction projects like dams to solve problems. They often turn to engineering to address issues. For many, the efforts to tackle climate change are seen as a big step forward, especially since the country is the world's biggest producer of carbon dioxide. But there are concerns about the ways these are being pursued. Groups like International Rivers argue that building dams might not be the best answer. They suggest looking into other renewable energy options instead. This raises some important questions. What will these projects cost? And what might be lost because of them? Many think that focusing on just one solution to reach carbon neutrality isn't the best idea. Considering how much these decisions will affect different areas, experts hope that the leaders in Beijing will soon share a clear plan for the far-off regions of Tibet. In Tibet, there's a special spot called the Great Bend, where the Yarlung-Tsangpo River makes a sharp curve, sending its waters towards India and Bangladesh. This bend wraps around one of the tallest mountains in the Himalayas, and at its center is the Yarlung-Tsangpo Grand Canyon. This canyon is the deepest and longest in the world, even longer than the famous Grand Canyon in the United States by about 50 kilometers and 3 times deeper. Big plans are in place for this location. As part of the 14th five-year plan, a hydroelectric dam is intended here, which is said to be the most powerful in the world. This project is set in one of the most remote places on Earth, making it one of the toughest and most expensive ever attempted on any river. Even though the details of the project are still a bit unclear, many experts think it could break new ground in engineering due to its size and complexity. The plan for the Makua hydropower station involves building a tunnel through a mountain that stands at a remarkable 7,700 meters. The idea is to divert water from a nearby river into this tunnel to produce up to 60 gigawatts of electricity. To put that into perspective, this would generate 3 times the amount of power currently produced by the Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River, which is the largest hydropower station in the world. Finally, we examine the risks and debates around building the world's biggest hydropower station, the quaking giant. The scale of this project is enormous, and to be honest, it seems quite impractical. There are many challenges to consider, especially since the planned site is in a very remote area called Meadow County. Until not too long ago, this place didn't have proper roads, which makes getting there even more difficult. From a geological and economic point of view, the location isn't ideal. It's situated right on the fault line between the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates. Back in 1950, this region was hit by a massive earthquake measuring 8.6 on the Richter scale near the Indian state of Assam, one of the strongest earthquakes ever recorded in the world. But that wasn't the worst part. Since the beginning of the 20th century, this area has experienced more than 4,000 earthquakes with a magnitude greater than 4.5. Earthquakes of significant size are common here, often making the news. For example, in March of 2021, a landslide close to the canyon partially blocked the Yarlung-Tsangpo River, showing just how unstable the ground is in this region. These conditions create serious challenges for building and running such a large hydropower project as the one planned at Mokwa. And if that wasn't enough, there are other problems that make this plan even more complicated. Far upstream, another landslide along a river in the Indian Himalayas caused a massive flood that destroyed a bridge, took many lives, and damaged 2 hydropower plants downstream. The new project is planned to be built close to Arunachal Pradesh, an area governed by India, but also claimed by China. This region is one of several disputed areas along a long and poorly defined border known as the Line of Actual Control. Since the 1960s, this area has seen many wars and conflicts between India and China. The most recent clash was in June 2020 in the Galwan Valley to the north, and it was the first to cause fatalities since 1975. The tension here is clear, and experts worry that building the world's biggest hydropower station so close to this disputed border could make relations between the 2 nuclear-armed countries worse. China may not see the project as a direct threat, but India and other countries downstream are seriously concerned. For people living downstream, there are fears beyond just political issues. Research shows that dams and hydropower projects can do a lot of damage to river ecosystems. One big problem is that these structures stop silt, which is meant to flow downstream naturally. This blockage can cause sediment to build up, damage turbines, erode riverbanks, and even cause river deltas to collapse. But that's not the only problem. Why take on such a risky project in the first place? One reason is China's ambitious environmental goals. The country wants to reach its peak carbon emissions by 2030 and aims for carbon neutrality by 2060. This push for more sustainable energy is one of the main reasons behind the project. However, the challenges faced by this hydropower project show just how tricky it is to balance the need for renewable energy with the need to protect natural ecosystems and keep the peace in the region. The dark path of China's Megadam. The goal of this massive project is not just to benefit local people, but to have a global impact. The focus isn't only on building a giant dam, but on using the natural power of the water. However, what was expected to be a huge success is now raising eyebrows. Instead of being a shining example of clean energy, this dam has sparked concern about potential environmental disasters and even international conflicts. As the turbines grind to a halt, the ominous silence that follows is not just the absence of machinery, it's the quiet before the storm. But this isn't the worst part. There's growing worry that the dam could be on the verge of failing, and there may be even more serious problems hiding beneath the surface. In this article, we'll look deeper into what's going wrong with China's Megadam, including the possible environmental chaos and worldwide effects it could trigger. With a price tag of 200 billion yuan, this project is even bigger than the Three Gorges Dam and has required some bold, risky decisions to make it happen. China's longest river, the Yangtze, is now lined with a series of dams, forming a network of hydropower stations in some of the most remote and dangerous areas on Earth. These rivers, which start high in the mountains, provide water to a large part of the world's population. The Yangtze River is especially important for China's economic goals, and more than a dozen dams are being built along its stretch, despite the narrow valleys and high risk of earthquakes that make construction difficult. But here's the real concern. This dam, which cost a staggering 200 billion yuan, about 28 billion US dollars, took almost 20 years to build. It forced more than 1 million people to leave their homes along the Yangtze River. The government promised the dam would protect against massive floods that only happen once in a century, but now there's doubt about whether it can actually do that. Recently, these worries have come up again as the Yangtze Basin experienced its heaviest rainfall in nearly 60 years, causing the river to overflow. And the situation gets even worse. As heavy rains continue to pour down in central and southern China, experts are sounding the alarm that one of the world's largest dams may be close to collapsing. The impact has been devastating. So far, more than 150 people have either died or are missing. 3.5 million have been forced to leave their homes, and 54 million people have been affected. The economic damage is estimated at 144 billion yuan, or about $2.5 billion US dollars. In a region called Sichuan Autonomous Prefecture, a large group of people gathered outside the local government office to express their concerns. They were asking for the construction of a new hydroelectric power plant to be stopped. This plant was planned to produce over 1 million kilowatts of electricity using the water from the Du River. However, building it would force many local Tibetans to leave their homes in the Upper Wono and Sha villages. It would also flood 6 important religious sites, including the Wono Monastery, which dates back to the 13th century and is known for its ancient murals. As the villagers fight to protect their sacred places, the growing demands along the Yangtze pose new challenges. The cultural clash over China's hydro ambitions. The villagers believe the project did not respect the importance of these sacred places, which play a key role in the religious and cultural life of the Tibetan Buddhist community. This issue shows the risks China is taking in its efforts to grow its economy. The Yangtze River, which is the longest river in Asia at over 6,000 kilometers, plays a crucial role in China's development. Starting from the Tibetan Plateau, the river runs across the country and flows into the East China Sea near Shanghai. It supports industries, provides water to millions of people, and contributes about 20% of China's GDP, especially in the Delta region. While building large dams can help cities get electricity, prevent flooding, and provide water for farming, they also come with big risks. These structures need huge amounts of water, around 22 billion cubic meters, which is controlled through 46 gates. Even though these projects are meant to help with sustainable growth, they can also damage the environment, displace communities, and destroy important cultural sites. But this wasn't the only problem. China's push for hydroelectric power is also causing tensions with India. For example, they're building a huge dam near the Brahmaputra River, which is close to the Indian border. The Three Gorges Dam, the biggest dam in the world, shows how determined China is to use its rivers for energy. While these dams help China move toward renewable energy, they also harm fragile ecosystems and threaten ancient Tibetan landmarks. With the reservoir at the Three Gorges Dam reaching its limit due to heavy rainfall and the ever-present risk of earthquakes in China, people are questioning whether the benefits of these massive dams are worth the possible dangers. In northern China, the upper part of the Yangtze River, also called the Jinsha River, flows between Tibet and Sichuan. This region has a massive potential to generate hydroelectric power. Experts believe it could produce 112 gigawatts of electricity, which is about 1/4 of China's total hydroelectric capacity. This area is well known for its fast-moving rivers that come down from the high Tibetan Plateau to the lower lands, making it an ideal place for generating power. The energy from the water in these rivers is being used to help China reach its carbon neutrality goals sooner. Hydroelectric power is a key part of their plan to reduce carbon emissions. But the big challenge is that these regions, with their fast rivers and tall mountains, are often unstable and prone to natural disasters. This makes building in these areas very risky. For example, in the Himalayas, there's a lot of potential for hydroelectric power because the rivers are fed by glaciers and melting snow. However, this area is one of the most earthquake-prone regions in the world. The meeting of two major tectonic plates creates many fault lines, which means there's always the risk of landslides, earthquakes, and floods that could damage or destroy the dams built in this region. A good case to consider is the Sichuan province, home to the famous Three Gorges Dam. While it generates a lot of hydroelectric power, the province is also known for being vulnerable to earthquakes. In 2008, an earthquake in the nearby Wenchuan area took over 87,000 lives. Even though the Three Gorges Dam survived, this disaster highlighted the dangers of building in such unstable areas. There are still concerns today about landslides and tremors, which threaten the safety of the dams. With high hopes for energy, the land's shaky nature adds a layer of risk. The last promise. While the potential for hydroelectric power is huge, the unstable ground adds an extra layer of difficulty to building safe and lasting structures. In the Yangtze River area, the way the tectonic plates move makes the land especially prone to earthquakes, which complicates construction even more. The largest dam in this river system will stand at 239 meters tall, higher than the Hoover Dam in the United States. Building such a massive structure right on the riverbed is no easy task. It requires placing rocks and concrete to make the river's soft bed stable enough to support the dam. But that's not the worst part. The surrounding mountains are steep and prone to landslides and avalanches, which means engineers have had to build large concrete barriers to stop erosion and keep the land stable. Some of these blocks are as big as skyscrapers and are strategically placed along the cliffs to protect the dam. The Yangtze River, while a source of energy and life, is also notorious for its violent floods. In the 20th century alone, these floods caused around 300,000 deaths. One of the most tragic floods occurred in 1931, eliminating about 145,000 people. After that, floods continued to wipe out farmland and cause billions of dollars in economic damage. Despite its importance, the Yangtze River presents significant challenges and dangers. In 1994, work began on the massive Three Gorges Dam to protect over 15 million people living in Shanghai and the lower Yangtze River floodplains. This huge dam was designed to stop floods across about 15,000 square kilometers. It was China's way of controlling nature, which has shaped the country's landscape for centuries. The dam was expensive, costing somewhere between $28 and $60 billion, though the exact amount is unclear due to a mix of private and government funding. Standing almost 200 meters tall and stretching over 2 kilometers across the wide Yangtze River, it was even built to handle earthquakes up to a 6.0 magnitude. Once it was finished, the dam created the Three Gorges Reservoir, a massive body of water that extends about 600 kilometers upstream. It can hold nearly 40 billion cubic meters of water. At the time, it became the largest hydroelectric facility in the world, producing more than 20,000 megawatts of power. To give you an idea, that's more than 20 times the power of the Hoover Dam and about the same as 18 nuclear power plants. If the same energy were produced using coal, it would add 100 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. The dam also made the Yangtze River easier to navigate, allowing large ships to travel deeper into China, which helped boost trade. But these benefits came with major downsides. The dam has caused serious environmental damage. It changed river ecosystems, endangered wildlife, increased waterborne diseases, worsened water quality by slowing down the river, and even caused landslides and small earthquakes. But this wasn't the worst part. More than 1 million people had to leave their homes because of the rising water. Communities were destroyed, and many cultural sites along the riverbanks were submerged. To try to address these environmental problems, an additional $4.8 billion was set aside during construction to build new water treatment and waste disposal sites upstream. Still, these issues continue to cause debate. The dam represents China's incredible engineering skill, but it also serves as a reminder of the huge costs that come with such large-scale projects. As water levels rise, so do concerns over the loss of history, the cultural casualties of China's rush to dam. Beyond the environmental effects, the dam also threatens China's rich cultural history. Historic temples, tall pagodas, and sacred monasteries, some hundreds of years old, are at risk of being destroyed by the rising reservoir waters. These places aren't just tourist sites, they are essential to the communities that live around them. In places like Tibet, monasteries are more than spiritual centers. They are the heart of village life. Losing one is like tearing out a community's soul. But what's even more worrying is that these dams are being built on land that isn't stable, threatening not just the buildings, but also the culture and history they hold. In areas where earthquakes are common, 2007 was a particularly shaky year. Over 100 tremors were recorded between the Sichuan Basin and the Yangtze River. There's a growing fear that a big earthquake could hit the fault along the Yangtze River, raising serious concerns about the safety of the many dams along the river. If just one of these dams were to break, it could cause a chain reaction, where more dams fail, leading to a much bigger disaster. But earthquakes aren't the only danger these dams bring. They also threaten important Tibetan cultural sites and old communities. Building just one large dam would create a massive reservoir that could stretch for miles, forcing people out of their homes and changing the landscape forever. According to an official report, the Yangtze Dam could force around 4,000 people to leave their homes and flood 5 major temples. One of the most at-risk sites is the Wo Monastery, built in the 13th century, which holds ancient frescoes and murals that have survived for hundreds of years. These priceless artworks could be lost forever if the dam goes up and the waters rise. And this isn't just happening quietly. Tibetans have protested against the dam, trying to stop its construction. However, it's been hard for them to make their voices heard since the Chinese government tightly controls the Tibetan areas. Ever since the military took control of Tibet in 1950, China has pushed to blend Tibetan culture into a more unified national identity that matches the Communist Party's ideals. Tibetan monasteries are more than just places for worship. They are at the heart of the community, deeply tied to its spirituality, culture, and social life. So when a monastery is destroyed, it's not just the building that's lost. Centuries of tradition, spirituality, and identity are wiped out, leaving a deep void where there was once a thriving community. But even with these strong protests from the Tibetan people, the Chinese government hasn't budged. They see the construction on the Yangtze River, a key part of the Yangtze, as essential to meeting China's huge hydroelectric needs. These massive dams are part of the country's push to develop quickly, though there are serious risks involved. Some locals compare these projects to fast food, because just like fast food, they offer quick benefits but come with big long-term problems. Sure, these dams will provide much-needed electricity to millions of people, but the cost is incredibly high. Entire villages and significant cultural treasures, like 700-year-old monasteries with priceless murals, could be lost underwater forever. These murals have survived wars and revolutions, but now face destruction in the name of progress. With the threat of natural disasters looming, the costs of progress come into question. The risks of giant dams in earthquake zones. The region where these dams are being built is prone to earthquakes and landslides. A sudden shift in the ground or an unexpected earthquake could cause these massive dams to fail, setting off a catastrophic chain of dam collapses, with devastating effects on the areas downstream. While China's energy needs are huge, and these dams are key to meeting those needs, the real question is, how do you weigh the immediate gains of energy production against the permanent loss of cultural history and the threat of environmental disaster? Balancing the need for more energy with preserving cultural heritage and protecting nature is one of the biggest challenges for many countries today. If you're wondering why a particular dam is such a big deal, let's take a look at how it stacks up against other dams around the world. You'll be amazed at how China's enormous dam outshines most of them. Around the world, massive dams like the Three Gorges Dam in China and the KBA Dam in Zambia are incredible feats of human engineering. These structures not only provide power and control flooding, but they also change entire landscapes. While they bring a lot of benefits, they also come with their own set of problems. Let's take a journey across the globe, from Zambia to Canada, and explore some of the world's largest dams, not just in terms of size, but also the vast amounts of water they hold. These large reservoirs are framed by their natural surroundings, huge cliffs, wide valleys, and the powerful rivers they control. There are some impressive records when it comes to dams. For example, the KBA Dam, built between 1955 and 1959 on the Zambezi River, right on the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe, is a giant. It holds the largest reservoir by volume, with the ability to store a jaw-dropping 185 billion cubic meters of water. French architect André Coin designed it, and the dam stretches 579 meters long and stands 128 meters tall. The construction was tough, and sadly, many workers, especially Italians, lost their lives building it. Today, the KBA Dam generates 1,320 megawatts of power for both Zambia and Zimbabwe. Efforts to repair and maintain this colossal structure continue today. Over in Ghana, we find the Akosombo Dam, which created Lake Volta, the world's largest man-made lake by surface area. Built between 1961 and 1965, this reservoir holds 144 billion cubic meters of water, making it the third largest in the world. Not only does this dam power Ghana, but it also provides energy to neighboring Benin and Togo. In Canada, there's the Daniel Johnson Dam on the Manicouagan River in Quebec. This dam can store 140 billion cubic meters of water, and it also holds the title of being the world's longest multiple-arch dam, standing 214 meters tall. It's named after a former Quebec premier who pushed for more hydroelectric power in the region. The Guri Dam in Venezuela, also called the Simon Bolivar Hydroelectric Plant, is another powerhouse. Its reservoir holds 135 billion cubic meters of water. For a long time, it was the most powerful dam in the world, generating 10,200 megawatts of electricity, enough to cover over 70% of Venezuela's power needs. Finally, there's the Aswan High Dam on the Nile River in Egypt. Its reservoir, Lake Nasser, can hold 132 billion cubic meters of water. Built between 1960 and 1968, this dam produces 2,100 megawatts of electricity and is also essential for flood control. What do you think? Are the environmental impacts of projects like the Aswan High Dam justified by their benefits? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.